It's an honor for me to be here to speak to you today when that book that Nick just mentioned, my first bestseller, was actually panned so bad by the American Dental Association that they threatened me with a lawsuit if I didn't dare remove that book from the exhibit floor in the American Dental Association meeting of 1996. So here we are, about 13 years later now, and I get invited back to speak to my first dental group. And the way I've been promoting my appearance here is before the most conscious dentists in the world. And so it's a privilege for me to be here, and I see some very familiar faces in the group that I've seen over many years, and I greatly appreciate the support that you, my dental colleagues, have administered to me over these years. You know, it's basically I've been somewhat of an outcast black sheep dentist, and if you know a little bit... And so the great news is that there's life after drilling, filling, and billing. You know, there's life after dentistry, and you know, it's kind of a lot of us who went into dentistry because we have a great respect for the technical aspects of that incredibly magnificent profession and service that we rendered as dentists. And I practiced clinical dentistry for 16 years, and I can tell you, I look back at those years and I say that the greatest blessing and memory I have is all those people who I still meet on the street who smile, and I can see my cosmetic dentistry and my crowns and bridges, and they're still happy to see me. And gee whiz, that's a wonderful thing that I could take to my grave, and I'm sure all of you can appreciate that, you know. So that's the best part of dentistry. The worst part of it is that we've got a dental organization that is part of a military, medical, pharmaceutical cartel that conducts genocide under the guise of public health. What you're looking at is a Da Vinci drawing that you will not see in any of the most recent books that herald themselves as being the complete Da Vinci, such as what you can find at Barnes & Noble bookstores, and you can see that as you go through it, this drawing is not there. This is a suppressed drawing, just like the book Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola was suppressed by the American Dental Association way back when. There are certain politically correct things, tracking, academic tracking, funding tracking, grant funding tracking, so that literally research and development and the entire evolution of the medical culture in which we live essentially evolves. And so what I want you to see here is that Da Vinci back, and we're going to talk a bit about Da Vinci, the most brilliant genius, was literally into the music and the mathematics that we're going to be sharing with you today that has to do intimately with electrogenetics, which is the topic of today's discussion and presentation. And that what really inspired Da Vinci to be all that he could be, that really blesses us to be all that we can be, as not just human beings, but literally as superhuman beings who have been dumbed down, mind controlled, enslaved by those who wish to continue to enslave humanity, again under the guises of economics and power politics and war and disease, which is induced literally to make money and keep people in fear, versus love, which is the universal solvent, solution, love. And we now have the mathematics and the music to share with you of love that shall set humanity free. And that's really what this topic is about. We're talking about electrogenetics. We're talking about the clinical applications. I guarantee you, if you're awake during this presentation today, at the end of it, you'll go back to your practices and you won't do anything the same way that you've been doing it in the past. You'll be adding one thing, and that is the musical mathematics of divinity, of creativity, of genius expression that Da Vinci and his mentors, Plato, Pythagoras, Aristotle, Vitruvius, all knew. This was the sacred, secreted knowledge. And this picture really says it all about who it is and what it is that we're up against. Here you have a picture that Da Vinci did for the Medici and the Borgias. This is for a Borgia wedding. He contributed this artwork. and it depicts the people that he was working for at the time. If you study history, you know Leonardo da Vinci was working as a military weapons contractor for the world's first crime family, the Medici family, who was a Jewish family. And there's a lot of sociopolitics and religious and theological challenges that come up for all of us to reconcile if we want to evolve ourselves into unity, into love, into peace, shalom, into a blessing of Yisrael, which is ultimately the meaning of Yisrael is not some besieged state in the Middle East. It's about where the lion lies down with the lamb, where we actually have peace on earth, where we recognize each other as Holy Spirit-filled beings, brothers and sisters in service to some greatest cause. And Da Vinci was engaged in the dark side. He was a military weapons contractor for the Jewish Medici family that instilled 5 popes into the Vatican during that age. Now, maybe that explains why the Pope still today wears a yarmulke. I'm not sure about that. But the reality is, here he depicts the #1 symbol for the Roman Catholic Church, known throughout history, is the pagan symbol of the bull, Baal, the fertility god. And you see that the bull is now a maritime voyager, a captain over a sea vessel that kind of looks like has an arc and an arch. We'll talk about at the end of this presentation that sacred geometry of that ark, that vessel that is sailing the tree of life over the stormy waters, spiraling, spinning vortices of water to the shores of the planet controlled by the royalty of Europe. It's pretty much no mystery today if you read any of the good historians today and people who I've drawn from numerous people, beautiful people, G. Edward Griffin, numerous other very, very reputable authors and historians who tell us that we're American corporation and where our institutions of academia flourished was primarily through the Rockefeller Foundation funding, and ultimately the Rockefellers had been advanced the money by the Rothschild family through J.P. Morgan Bank back in the late 1800s, and they established by the early 1920s a monopoly over the American Medical Association and the American Cancer Society, and as a result of the persecution of alternative healthcare professionals, literally getting rid of the competition, we have now evolved into this pseudoscience realm, what they call science and medical science and public health, which literally eliminates all discussion of Rife technology, frequency vibration, the whole hydrosonic realm, full understanding of how the Holy Spirit actually works, how it heals. It's not drugs that do that. You know, most of you in this room knows that there's energy going on. Well, that discussion of spirituality with separation of church and state and the economics of the impositions of infectious diseases, dental caries being one. And we'll share some things today with you that you'll be able to see that we have the solutions to every problem on earth, and they've simply been neglected because it's profitable. Now that means profiteering off of humanity's suffering is best defined by one word in Webster's dictionary. That word is genocide. Now we're not just talking about genocide in the sense that standard definition, quote, the mass killing or enslaving of people for profit, politics, and or ideology. That's the standard classic definition of genocide. We're not just talking about that standard classic definition of genocide here today in 2009. We're talking about omnicide. We're talking about a culture, a pseudo-scientific culture wherein the sciences, the new sciences have become the new God. We're talking about the medical deities instead of faith and trust in a Holy Spirit and a creator that has an incredible source and intelligence to be able to create the entire universe. Ultimately, we turn our faith and trust over to popping magic pills to cure every ill. We've been indoctrinated into that system. You and I both know what dental education was about. We know the same thing goes for our medical colleagues. It's about trauma. It's about abuse. For the residents, it's about losing sleep for many, many days and weeks. The fear of failure, fear of having spent all that time and money invested into this system, and then subsequently, you then are engaged. And the tracking of you from that moment of engagement through this trauma, it's basically standard indoctrination that any cult uses. Trauma-based education, setting up the neuroprogramming, the neuroses, the neurological patterning, so that ultimately who graduates, yes, we're esteemed as the doctors. However, if we're engaged in having those blinders, it's called a scatoma in medical dictionary. An inability to see beyond those blinkers, those blinders. So we can't see the forest of opportunity through the trees of this counterintelligence propaganda that dumbs us down, subsequently makes us no longer see what healing arts and sciences are truly about. And what's taking place today in every field is a degeneration. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to see it. You've got all of these frogs and all various species being born now genetically impaired from the chemical toxicity. The water is impure. The air is impure. The foods are garbage. Absolutely what the FDA gives you as allegedly recommended and sanctioned is poison. Who sources these things such as aspartame is people like Donald Rumsfeld, who is not only conducting war and conducted war as Secretary of Defense under the Bush administration, but you had the directorship of Cereal Corporation that created aspartame to begin with. And this is just one example of thousands upon thousands and thousands of examples. This is called omnicide. It is not humane. It is not loving. It is not sensitive. It is not empathetic to the suffering. It is not human. I tell you that as an expert in behavioral science. I tell you that the values that you and I hold as practitioners and as brothers and sisters sitting in this room today bears no semblance to the decision and decision makers that are in control of this planet. So this is indeed an extremely urgent time in history where there's got to be a huge awakening, and I'm here to tell you that there's some fabulous news. I'm going to share with you today how we win. I'm going to share with you today the technology by which the Creator has given us to advance so that we can see how we're going to come from this gross degeneration of everything that we hold dear to some magnificent place, literally Yisrael, where the lion lies down with the lamb, where we have the opportunity to restore everything that's been broken. From the environment, from the pollution, to the intoxication, to the disease induction, we have solutions for everything. That's what this presentation on electrogenetics is really about. This whole issue of autistic spectrum disorder, this past week, if you were paying attention to the news and to the internet discussions, it occurred what I predicted was going to occur back in 1998 when I learned for the first time that the National Vaccine Information Center had advanced politically and economically the major National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986 with the drug industrialists that intoxicate humanity with mercury, and that I saw back then, given who was behind this whole allegedly mounting huge super fund of money that was going to then go to the families of the poor autistic children, that it was a setup and it was a scam. Largely perpetrated by Barbara Lowe Fisher, the director of the National Child Director of National Vaccination Information Center, which has been positioned politically and media positioned as the grassroots good guys that suckered everybody in, gave them money, funded so that we would have a voice. We don't have a voice because all of those, what they call astroturf, you know, astroturf, grassroots. Looks like grassroots, but it doesn't have any roots. It's plastic. It's laid out before the big game. That's what the National Vaccination Information Center is. But that's done. It's another classic example of how every single field is controlled. All the grassroots empowerment organizations are undermined, they're infiltrated, and ultimately controlled by the same menaces that are conducting biocide, omnicide. So this whole sad truth about the vaccinations and the mercury intoxications, that the ADA actually has a patent on the mercury, I understand, that's being used, and that's one of the biases, and subsequently all the biases whenever you see the legislation coming out. And this past week, that entire multi-billion-dollar fund, the mainstream media, Associated Press, told you that there's been a reversal, that they're not going to pay any money out because allegedly they have sound science that speaks to no mercury toxicity from the vaccinations and no significant association to autistic spectrum disorders. This is pseudoscience. It is genocide. So, in 1998, I was privileged to be blessed by a Dr. Joseph Palaio, who had been praying for me to come to be the bearer of the great news. He had a vision. Dr. Joseph Palaio is a naturopathic doctor who was recently deceased. He had a vision where Jesus came to him one night with a big angel and showed Dr. Palaio in the Bible where what he was looking for exists. He was looking for the original musical scale, called the original solfeggio. And at the time, having lost my mother to a vaccine-related injury called Guillain-Barré, who my mother, like most of your parents, gave full faith and trust to the medical deities who assigned them to the vaccinations and subsequently being injected with foreign RNA and DNA and bacteria, viral particles, and then from the various species, from chicken embryo, bovine fetal serum, monkey kidney tissues, and with smallpox vaccine, it's called cow pus. My mother died, and it wasn't before a couple more years of research that I learned why. I learned, essentially, that the people that she escaped by miracle as a 16-year-old in Nazi-occupied Vienna literally had progeny in today's drug pharmaceutical cartel that are conducting this. Come get your children vaccinated. If you love your children, you're going to get them vaccinated, they tell you. Meanwhile, that's the punchline for the movie The Green Mile. If you remember, the angel came down at the end of the movie. He wanted to go to his own death in the electric chair because he said, I can't stand the way they use love to kill. You love your country, you send your children to war. You love your children, you get them vaccinated. My mother believed in all that, and so subsequently she died from the progeny. Merck Pharmaceutical Company received the lion's share of the Nazi war chest at the end of World War II. On YouTube right now, you can see an interview that was suppressed. I put it up a couple months back with Dr. Maurice Hilleman, the world's leading vaccine chief for the Merck Pharmaceutical Company, explaining to you how he brought AIDS into the world. From chimpanzees, monkeys, he brought from Africa to produce the hepatitis B vaccine given to gay men in New York City and blacks in Central Africa between 1972 and 74. All of that, by the way, has been suppressed. The mainstream media doesn't want to discuss it. The dental or medical organizations, agencies, public health, nobody wants to talk about the shipment of the chimpanzee shipped by America's sixth top biological weapons contracting lab called Lytton Bioenergetics to Dr. Maurice Hilleman at the Merck Pharmaceutical Company. Nobody wants to talk about that. So Dr. Palaio felt that there was a solution in the original music that was played to the greatest spiritually uplifting hymn of all the ages, called the Hymn to St. John the Baptist. And he got burnt out in his research, he couldn't find it, and he prayed. And one night Jesus and a big angel came to him. That's his story. I wrote it. The first 6 chapters of the book Emerging of Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse is Dr. Palaio's story. And he tells us that the angel showed up, and Jesus showed up with him and showed him in the book of Numbers, chapter 7, verses 12 through 83, the original frequencies, the electromagnetic frequencies, cycles per second, hertz frequencies, by which the original 6 tones of the ancient solfeggio and the Hymn to St. John the Baptist played. So that book is really a fundamental shift in how we look at healing. It's a fundamental look at our bodies as being virtual music-filled vessels. The thesis that I'm about to advance to you holds the best definition of who you are. Is you are a digital, bioholographic precipitation, crystallization, miraculous manifestation of divine frequency vibration coming out of water. I know it doesn't seem like we're in water right now, but I assure you we are. This atmosphere is hydrated. Otherwise, we'd be dead. It's not as wet as what the dolphins, the cetacea, our brothers and sisters from the sea are living in. But we are coming out of water. The field of electrogenetics speaks to that. This whole understanding of electrogenetics and how we can now begin to apply this fundamental, basic, simple knowledge in everyday healthcare is really what this program today is about. So in 1998, we came out with the first understanding that we are the music, and that everything we're doing has relationship to frequency. And what's frequency? Well, let's take a look at the beginning. In the beginning, there was the Creator. It says Genesis 1:1, 1:2. Just reread Genesis 1:1, 1:2. That holds for all theologies, all the different cultures. Whether you're a Jew or a Christian or a Muslim or a Native North American or an Aboriginal in, let's say, New Zealand or Australia or India or a Buddhist. The same theology is understood that in the beginning there was a grand creator and there was the water. And then Genesis 1:1 says that the Holy Spirit of the Creator hovered over the face of the water and divided the water from the water to create what it calls the firmament or the dome or the quantum field. Because if you ever try to separate water from water, you know you just get wet, unless you're a physicist. You start separating the monoatomics, H2O, the hydrogen from the oxygen, and suddenly you go into this quantum field space. Now that's what we're talking about here, into which then the Word was spoken, out of which everything was created. So that means word. What is word but sound? What is sound but electromagnetic frequencies? What's that? Simply math. Simple math. There's only 9 numbers in the universe. 1 through 9. That's it. 10 is actually a man-made concept. The zeros are placeholders. The decimal system was man-made. The Creator's language is math, and there's only 9 numbers to it. 9 is completion. So this is the material that we started to come out with the book Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse. And by the way, that word apocalypse, I didn't know at the time that we named the book that. I didn't know what apocalypse really means. It's not a negative. It's not a frightening thing. It actually means an unveiling of the truth that shall set us free. So you've heard the truth shall set you free, the greatest secreted truths of all the ages have the capacity to emancipate humanity completely. That's what you're doing here today. That's what I'm doing here today. So the greatest secreted truths have to do with this language of math. And I'm humbled and privileged to be sharing with you the works of several geniuses in the area of mathematics and physics here today, one of which is Marco Rodin, who started with taking simple mathematic patterns, very simple patterns, such as this pattern that you see here, where you double the numbers starting with 1, placed on a circle, by the way. Double number 1, you get 1 and 1 is 2. 2 and 2 is 4. 4 and 4 is 8. 8 and 8 is 16, where in ancient mystery school Pythagorean math, because there's only 9 numbers in the universe, the way that you deal with multiple digit integers is you reduce them to the single digit. So 8 and 8 is 16, where 1 plus 6 is 7. 7 and 7 is 14, where 1 plus 4 is 5. 5 and 5 is 10, where 1 plus 0 is 1. That's the infinity pattern. Rodin, based on this work I'll show you later, developed the structure of the universe, the toroidal structure of the universe based on the simple analysis of mathematical patterns. And he calls this as God's signature on everything. Well, you know, a couple years ago finished a book called Love, the real Da Vinci Code. Did you notice it in the book by Brown and in the movie, the Da Vinci Code? There was no code. Where's the code? What I'm going to share with you today is the code, the real Da Vinci Code. And this analysis begins where I decrypted the Vitruvian woman. The Vitruvian woman. It's actually called the Vitruvian man. In the patriarchal society that has literally abused the women and dishonored the creative capability, the superior creative capability of women. This is called the Vitruvian man in the world. It's the most famous drawing in the world. It is on the back of the Eurodollar. It is the icon for natural living and holistic healing. It's a cryptograph. It's encrypted. You see, there's a person here. Let me just tell you, I'm summarizing right now the book, Love, the Real Da Vinci Code. You see, there's a square. The guy is stuck in the box of earthly limitation. According to art historians, the box represents the Babylonian planet in which we're been inducted into gross deception and poisoned. That's the earthly plane. The circle represents the cosmic, universal plane. And you see that there is 2 feet standing on the square. The man's hands are completely inscribed in the square. And how do we know that that's a man? Well, it's the Vitruvian man. But the center of the square is his penis. The center of his earthly plane experience is that member that the honest guys among us will tell you, and the women already know it, that most of our time is spent thinking about how to satisfy that member. So, yeah, it's just nothing new. You know that. It's like, we don't talk about that. It's a big taboo subject, but it's just like kind of obvious to all the ladies in the room, And it's obvious when we guys get together, we talk about it too. But the reality is, that's how we know it's a man. But look at the circle. She exclusively have stepped out of the box of earthly limitation and placed her feet squarely on the circle. Her hands alone pierced the square and actually touched the circle. And how do we know that that is a woman? because the center of her universe is the umbilical cord. That's a female reproductive organ. So this is Da Vinci, who was attempting to balance and integrate his male-female, his left brain, right brain, and that's really, I'll tell you in a minute, why he wrote backwards, because of the left brain, right brain shift that occurs. So, also Da Vinci studied water. This is Old Man Water by Da Vinci. And if you blow this up, you see a Moses-looking character. Moses' name means saved by the water. A Moses-looking character who places his staff down into the water where it starts to spiral and spin. Which is interesting because now we're getting engaged in the fundamentals of this topic today, the spiraling, spinning universe. Why does the water not just go plop down your drain? Why does it always spin and spiral? Why does your DNA spin and spiral? Why do the cosmic bodies always spin and spiral? Because of the matrix math. You'll learn that more here. So that this is the beginning of Da Vinci's analysis, and he finally says to you and I, you know, you want to put a big smile on your face? This is Da Vinci's John the Baptist, pointing up. You want to go to heaven? You want to create heaven on earth and put a smile on your face? It's all about baptism. Baptism, holy water, the creative juice, the liquid crystal, the superconductor of spiritual energy. It's all about the water. So if in the beginning there was the Creator, there was the water. Even before mention of the Holy Spirit and even before mention of the Word, there was the Creator and the water. That means if you really do your Bible study, you will find that water is part of the triune God. Before there was the Trinity in history, there was the Creator, the water, and the Holy Spirit. That's called the triune God. Now, how much of your body weight right now, well hydrated, is water? About 80%. You know what that means? Let's get down to basics, brothers and sisters. The fact of the matter is, I must honor you and every single one of you, brothers and sisters, as powerful co-creators, as literally gods and goddesses with small g's. So, when you start to look at this whole concept of the triune God, and then you go back into history, you look at the whole myths of Moses and the stories of Moses and everything that involves with King David and his harp and his, miraculous capabilities to be in the flow. And when you begin to integrate this whole spirituality and understanding of this thing called the kingdom of heaven, where there's nothing missing, nothing broken, there's no dis-ease therein. Well, that sounds like, to me, the musical mathematical matrix, where 1 and 1 is always 2, 2 and 2 is always 4, it always follows perfectly. It's the law. And it's the creative technology. So if you know the law, and you know the creative technology, as powerful co-creators, what do we get a chance to do? We get a chance to create, co-create, and create remedies for this planet in urgency, in urgent need right now. Now let's start at the basics. Let's go back and teach you what you've not been taught. The fundamentals of Pythagorean mathematics. What Aristotle and Plato and Vitruvius taught their students. It's a subject called polymath. If they started to teach us this in kindergarten and then continued through college and professional training, it would be a completely new planet. Just like Nikola Tesla, who I don't need to tell you who that is in this audience, said to his students, quote, "If humanity only knew the power of the 3s, 6s, and 9s, it would be a completely different universe." Aristotle, Vitruvius taught their students, if humanity only knew the powers of the 3s, 6s, 9s, and 8s, it would be a completely different universe. It's based on a fundamental understanding of polymath. Poly sources from the Greek word meaning much, great in quantity, and mathese meaning learning. So a person who excels in multiple fields, particularly both arts and science, is also called Renaissance man, as a master of polymath. Da Vinci is seen as the epitome of the Renaissance man. He was a master of polymath. Polyhistor. Polyhistor. This is in Webster's dictionary, folks. You never heard of these words, probably. A couple of you are shaking your head like you have. But most of you haven't. Raise your hand if you've never heard of these words before. Vast majority of you. Professionally trained, never heard of these words. Polyhistor is a synonym for polymath. In fact, histor and math mean the same. Knowledge, learn, or learned. Histor implies erudition and wisdom. Erudition, derived from the Middle English and Latin word, means the scholarly achievement from instruction and reading, followed by assimilation and contemplation that efface all rudeness. Bet you have some friends and family who you could give that to, right? And it smooths away all raw incivility. It is the depth, polish, and breadth that is applied to education. And by the way, the word education today is completely engaged in what is actually indoctrination. The real word education sources from the Greek word educare, which means to draw forth from within the unique giftings and talents and creative capabilities that we are endowed with by nature. And each one of us has specific giftings. That's the real education, is for parents and teachers to tune into where that student's gifts are and be able to literally help that child express those gifts. But what is it today? Education. Get a career. Get the American dream. History. The word history, with an E, the symbol for energy, implies knowledge of energy and mathematics underlying energetics. Both of these are timeless, eternal, and fundamental to everything. Meanwhile, I don't want you to go too far. The fundamental understanding that you've got to really totally take in and integrate for your practices to be all that they can be is this understanding of fundamental energy dynamics. The entire universe is a piezoelectric system. Everything is transfer of that electron. That's the energy. You blink your eye, it's electrons. You have alternating current, thanks to Tesla. Lights go on. What's happening? Electron flow through copper wire. It's all piezoelectricity. The entire universe. Oxidative reduction reactions. That's all that's going on. But we don't learn the basics of that, and most importantly, we don't learn that it all sources from water. It's all coming from the liquid crystal. H2O. NASA scientists about only 9 years ago allegedly discovered that space is full of water. They found water in rocks in Mars. They've now filmed snow in Mars. The universe, they found gas trails of water throughout space. So to the farthest shores of the universe, there's water waves flowing, energy, electron. And what's the carrier? Oxidative reduction reactions. What's the carrier of the energy? The breath of life. The oxygen. H2O. Oxygen is the carrier. So this is a fundamental understanding of history and evolution of the species, survival of the fittest now as we are evolving into being fully conscious. The opportunity now presents itself for us to use the creative technology to solve all of humanity's problems, all of the iniquities. Here's what Da Vinci said on certainty. Relative to the above definitions and understandings, Da Vinci is quoted as having said, "There is no certainty where one cannot apply any of the mathematical sciences." That includes geometry, sacred geometry, sources from the matrix that I'm going to share with you the mathematics of today. Universal certainty, divine human unity, Co-creativity is established by math. The road to finding oneself, including one's highest qualities and greatest creative potentials, is paved by this mystery school math, engaging this thing called the matrix. Now, what's the matrix? It's not just a great Hollywood film. The matrix is found in the Bible in many places. Webster's dictionary defines it as something within or from which something else originates, develops, or takes form. A rectangular array of numbers, algebraic symbols, or mathematical functions. Matrices play intimate roles in every aspect of life. In Exodus, in the book of Numbers, Moses bade sacrifice to the Lord. All that open up the matrix. Give out to the Creator. Give away. Give it over. All that's necessary to open the matrix for you to be the deliverers. To let our people go, we've got to open the matrix in all flesh. This was done so the Hebrews could be freed. God said, everything that openeth the matrix in all flesh shall. That word is important. Shall means no ifs, ands, buts about it. It is. It shall be thine. Can I take some water, brother? Thanks a lot. So why Da Vinci wrote backwards? Science shows the right hemisphere of your brain is more active spiritually and intuitively. Oh, thanks. So this right hemisphere of the brain, that's heavily suppressed in our society. It's more arts than science-oriented. It's more intuitive and creative and inspired than this thing that we get indoctrinated in health professional training programs. And undoubtedly, this right brain shares more peaceful coexistence with your heart. In actual point of fact, this right brain concept is really the heart mind. It's not the hemisphere only. So it's generally more receptive, female, and creative. On the other side, rational reasoning is processed more by your left hemisphere. You guys and gals know a lot about that. That's where your training has been, the bulk of it. It's more egocentric. It's largely fear-based. Thought processing center goes into trauma, fear. You don't get the grades. From the minute you get whacked on your butt, which is an unnecessary trauma upon birth, ideal birth is water birth at home. From that moment of trauma on to where you go to school and now you have to worry about getting at least a C to pass, and if you don't, now you're fearful. So instead of this whole concept of education drawing forth from within, you're engaged in this competition to make the grade. Now you see others as competitors. If they win, you lose. Suddenly this whole manipulation, it becomes neuroses. By the way, the strict definition of neurotic behavior, which is a sickness, it's an imbalance, is associated with these factors solely. Pain, fear, real or imagined threats to survival. Now you understand why they're called anchor men on the evening news. That's the egoic mind that the evening news plays to. Pain, fear, loss, real or imagined threat to survival, projected into your living room. And then with all the entrainment, that is a hypnosis machine. That's what that is. Classical definition of hypnosis is a relaxation coupled with clear channel for communication. So television is a hypnosis machine. And what they're indoctrinating is this egoic left brain, which cuts us off from the heart mind to give us this full potential. So this is what we're dealing with, and we're understanding that Da Vinci wrote backwards. Why? Well, you have additional scientific data that says language is similarly divided in adult brains, not children's. Language typically activates left brain. Your right hemisphere engages, as I just mentioned, creative artistic domains more active in children. Seriously, why do you think that despite all the science, besides the basic common sense that tells you mercury is one of the most toxic substances on this planet, they're injecting a mercury and aluminum that's a neurotoxin into the children in vaccinations? The real answer, and it took me some time to come to this determination. I dared not say it for about 8 or 9 years. I'm now telling you openly. The consensus of opinion is that they're doing it because the children today are engaged in an evolutionary unfoldment of their highest spiritual blessings. They're indigos, they're called. They're supposed to be even having different DNA. I have one of them in my family that is amazing. Next week, there's another one that we're meeting with called Akiana. She's been on Oprah. At 7 years old, she's obviously channeling the master artists on the planet. These children have the capacity to be that way, and they're being injected with neurotoxins in order to suppress that spirituality because it's a mass awakening of humanity to divinity, to creativity. So that's what this is really about. It's not just about, we don't have the science to prove mercury causes anything. The fundamental violation of divine direction, creative communion for sake of tempting knowledge. This is what we're engaged in now when we focus solely on the left brain. So humanity's left brain speaks while its right heart mind yearns to sing. Now, Da Vinci wrote backwards because I'm about to show you that English, that has derivations in Italian and Latin and even Greek, and even before that, the sacred languages of Hebrew, Sanskrit, Aramaic, and Babylonian had a resonance frequency attached to it. Now you think about this for just a second. You know, we're all told that the gods, the Creator says to the gods, the Elohim in the beginning of the Bible, he says, hey guys, let us create man in our image. So there's numerous other super beings. And then beyond that you have the Nephilim, the angels, the fallen angels, the Herculeans in the Bible. And of all the other cultures, you've got the same kind of super beings, angels, a whole other realm. A parallel universe is operating right here, right now. Our limited senses just can't perceive that. But the fact is, in the beginning, the Creator says, let's make them in our image. Let's give them, enable them, empower them with all the wonderful things and blessings to live eternally. And so the spoken word was spoken, creativity out of water occurred. Now, do you think that the Creator, if that's the case, would send you down here to this planet unprepared, as you, like you would send your children unprepared to school? Heck no. You would send your children to school with all the books, all the pencils, all the paper. And there's one thing that you long for one day as a parent, is that your child comes home and says, Dad, gee whiz, thank you so much for being a blessing in my life. You showed me things I would never have gotten. Because of you, I've done such a wonderful thing. And that's what we long for as parents, isn't it? Same thing with mothers, right? So what is the technology, the creative technology that the Creator gave us to be able to come home and sing praises to the Creator for all the things that we've created? It's the lips. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, labiatum in Latin, the lips, the creative instruments, the lips. So the languages are the creative technologies. And the lips and the heart mind is the heartfelt, loving intention to create something miraculous. You are the manifestation of the Creator's loving, joyful prayer. And how you and I need to create Now you understand why Tesla prayed over every technology he ever developed as he was developing it and before he turned it on. And probably, if he didn't, it wouldn't have worked. So, Da Vinci wrote backwards because of this knowledge that he held, working as the Grand Master for the Parisian, the highest secret society in all the world, as the master technician and military weapons contractor for the crime families, controlling the governments of his age. Through usury, the enslavement system that Christ, at the steps of the temple, beat the money changers, saying, "Don't enslave my people, let my people go." The enslavement, the maximum enslavement, is that we don't unify, that we don't come together, that we keep seeing each other in competition versus collaboration. That we're engaged in this judgmental mind that not only judges every single other person that comes our way, but ourselves. What the master meditators yearn for and practice the meditation skills to have peace, shalom, a true inner blessing, where the sound of silence carries the spiritual essence of divinity for the restoration of all humanity. The sources of the deception is in the Bible too. It's the story of Babylon. You remember when they were building a temple, a castle to the sky, and they were so cool, they thought that they were so hot. The egos took over. And the Creator says, "I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to confuse the tongues, change the languages." And what happened? The people couldn't communicate anymore. Society fell apart. Well, that's exactly what Da Vinci was looking at in the 1400s, when the English language was in the process of being created by the Anglo-Saxons. Who's that? Well, there's some relationship to the tribe of Judah and the royalty. The royalty, the major movers and shakers that is on that Da Vinci drawing in an eagle standing on top of the world. So now what we've done is we've basically exposed it. In 1998, we came out with healing codes of the biological apocalypse, and then a little bit later on, I decoded the Illuminati. You know that word, Illuminati? About 13 of the world's wealthiest families that are virtually controlling everything, except for God. They're not controlling God. They would like to, and that's what they're about. But here's the reality. In Death in the Air, Globalism, Terrorism, and Toxic Warfare, that came out 3 months before September 11th. This came out in June of 2001. Look at the title, Death in the Air, Globalism, Terrorism, and Toxic Warfare. Not too many people were talking about that before 9/11. We came out with the Illuminati's code, their creative language that has been suppressed. The Creator's language, Creator's core creative technology, math, frequency, vibration, language, word, sound, resonance. That's a language. And here we show you from healing codes. Dr. Palaio took the English alphabet, numbered 1 to 26, A to Z, and then again I told you 1 to 9, 1 to 9, 1 to 8, because there's only 9 numbers. He took the words trust, faith, and God. They're all 8s. Interesting. So then we took the multiples of 8. 1 times 8 equals 8. 2 times 8 equals 16, where 1 plus 6 is 7. 3 times 8 equals 24, where 2 plus 4 is 6. 4 times 8 equals 32, where 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 times 8 is 40, 4 plus... You see the pattern? 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's a pattern. That means the language itself has a perfect pattern. Now watch this. When you add the English alphabet backwards to the English alphabet forwards, 8 plus 1 is 9, 7 plus 2 is 9, 6 plus 3 is 9, 5 plus 4 is 9. It's perfect. So it's done intelligently. It wasn't done haphazardly by accident that way. So now you begin to understand the Illuminati's code that you'll see everywhere. Your life is going to change after this program today because you're awakened. You're going to see it now. Look, what is the X's? Sixes. The F's are sixes. The O's are sixes. How about Fox? F-O-X. 666. How about XXX, the most lucrative of adult entertainment? Media. 666. How about so indoctrinated into the culture when we sign little X's and O's at the bottom of our letters to people, kisses and hugs, we're writing 666666666. When you play tic-tac-toe, what do you use? X's and O's. At the end of the game, you got 666666666. 6 times 9 is 54. 5 plus 4 is 9. Completion. Game over. How about this one? Indoctrination into the culture. When you and I were children, what did we learn to say? Cross my heart and hope to die. How many of you learned that one? Yeah, most of us. XXX, 666. The darkest before the dawn in the Bible. In the book of Revelation, in the end times, when the great plagues have struck, when there's wars and there's rumors of war, when there's earth changes and weather changes, Creator could have said a lot of things. Here's the counsel. Revelation 13:18. Here's what it says. Quote, "Herein lies wisdom. Let those who understand count the number of the beast. For it is also the name of a man, and his number is 666. End quote. It's a riddle. As counsel in the end times, the darkest time in history, the Creator gives you a riddle to solve. But it's an easy one. Think about it. Counting is done with numbers. Names are written with letters. So obviously, you need an alphanumeric code to solve that riddle, don't you? So when you read the book Death in the Air, you'll learn I took all the suspects. The only one whose name comes out to 666 is Kissinger. Kissinger is 666. What's the relationship? Rockefeller made him everything that he is. The reason why we have nuclear weapons deployed around the face of the planet today, you can thank Kissinger on behalf of Rockefeller that ran the Council on Foreign Relations Nuclear Weapons Study Group and came up with the deployment objectives and agenda for the strategic nuclear weapons. The reason why we have AIDS today, this is the subject matter of the book Emerging Viruses. The proof is in the science, the real science. Kissinger requisitioned Litton Bioenergetics, Roy Ash's company, in the Nixon White House, to create a biological weapon descriptively and functionally identical to HIV/AIDS for the deployment for depopulation, particularly of third world nations. So Kissinger is a great suspect, and I suspect strongly, based on these revelations, that he's your 666 agent. And more importantly than this, can you think of any other ways that you can spell 666? Well, there are numbers of them, and you'll begin to see that. And then you'll begin to look at the logos of your major companies. Like, example, anybody ever looked at the word Exxon and said, that's a strange name for them to name a company? It used to be Esso, E-S-S-O, But really, Exxon, XXO, there's your 666 in the middle of two fives. Fives are typically, you see 5 limbs, 4 arms, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head, right? We're pentagonal structured, 5, 5. Human condition are the number 5, the fives. On either side of human condition, in the middle, you got 666. There are The number itself, though, I'm going to share with you a little bit later. I pray I'll have some time. There's nothing inherently evil about any of the numbers. 666 is not an inherently evil number. Most of the Christian community, steeped in deception, think that you've got to run away from anybody that carries a 666. Wrong. Sixes, Satan created nothing. The Creator created everything. The sixes were created as a symbol for manifestation. It's a spiraling down from heaven to the wholeness of earth. The application of which could be, like Tesla said, if humanity only knew the powers of the 3, 6s, and 9s, everything that you should be doing in your clinical practices should be engaged in doing it 3, 6, 9 times. I'll show you a little bit later some work from Dr. Emoto and Dr. Lorenzen in water science and pharmaceutical analysis that speak to, for example, in cultures when you're trying an antibiotic out, if you expose the bacterial culture to an antibiotic for 3 minutes, 6 minutes, 9 minutes versus 2, 4, 5, you have far increased efficacy of the antibiotic, of the kill rate. And you'll begin, as you read science, and then you reflect on Scripture. Look at all the times that the 3, 6s, and 9s foremost are used in the Bible and efficacy related in science. Now, do you see any numbers in this logo? The main sponsors of Live Earth. Al Gore tells you global warming is a menace. You got Live Earth saying we got to have concerts and we got to have programs to defeat global warming. Come together as humanity over Live Earth. Main sponsor of Live Earth, PepsiCo. Do you see any numbers here? No, you don't. But flip it backwards like Da Vinci trained himself to see. And suddenly there are the numbers. 1, 2, 9, 3, 9. That's a 6. It's a wealth symbol. It's for literally manifesting wealth. You see this symbol here? There's a yin-yang symbol on its side here. We'll come back to this later. How come they are using that symbol? I'll show you in a couple minutes. In Canada, the effort to eliminate all the botanicals, herbs, vitamins, the homeopathics, the silver products, the nanosilvers, colloidal silvers, they call it RX, prescribed C51. Do the numbers. You got a homework assignment. Do the numbers. You'll see. 3, 6s, and 9s. Take the multiples of 3, 6, and 9s. You also begin to see something interesting. You always come out to 3, 6s, and 9s when you take the multiples of 3, 6s, and 9s. They're special. So in 1996, when Dr. Palaio first got the code of the original musical scale, and then in 98 when we published it, I didn't know that this man here, Dr. Lee Lorenzen, who was my water science mentor, was going to be thrilled at the revelation. I was having dinner with Lee Lorenzen. This is Dr. Masaru Emoto. He's a friend and colleague. We work intimately together. We're going to have a magnificent event this summer solstice I'll tell you more about, called Live H2O, the Concert for the Living Water. We're going to baptize the planet. And so Dr. Lorenzen was Dr. Emoto's water science mentor and mine. And I'm having dinner with Lee Lorenzen in 1998, just after I came out with Healing Codes, and I said, you know, we just published the original musical scale. He says, really? I said, yeah. I said, the frequencies are 396, 417, 528. He almost falls off his chair when I said 528 and starts laughing. I mean, he had full food in his mouth. He almost choked. I said, what are you laughing at? He says, I can't believe you have 528 in the original musical scale. He says, that's what I know. The world's leading genetic biochemists know that to be the miraculous repair frequency for damaged DNA. Subsequently, we learned a lot more about 528. When you ask, how is it possible that you could produce a sound frequency that would resonate, vibrate broken genetic strands into back that shape. It opens up the whole field of understanding called cymatics, defined as the effects of sound on matter. And in water cymatics, where you begin to you play like John Reed does with his chymograph, frequencies to watch the patterns in the water and then take pictures of those patterns, you see the sacred geometry come out of the frequency. And so the concept now we've taken far beyond this with getting the revelations that we have. The sacred geometry of the entire universe is based on these 6 frequencies. Actually, probably 9, but we have absolute certainty mathematically of how the original solfeggio scale is associated with pi, phi, and all of major sacred geometry. The 6 notes, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, 396, 417, 528, 6397, 418, 52, add them up. They're all 3 6s and 9s. Again, where did he get this? Where did Dr. Palaio get this? By divine revelation in the book of Numbers, chapter 7, verses 12 through 83. The verse numbers to the Bible were not in the original Torah. They were added by the ancient Levitical priests. The priests, the Levitical priests, hold the knowledge. They've been chosen to carry the genetic vibration of the wisdom, the ancient wisdom, their response able for carrying that. They were the ones who created the verse numbers in the Bible when they originally translated the Bible from the Greek Septuagint into the King James Version, or later became the King James Version of the Bible. So the third note, 528, is special. Ut, re, mi, miragistorum in Latin, miracles in English. Miracle. 5 plus 2 is 7, plus 8 is 15, 1 plus 5 is 6. Miracle 6, or MI6. You've just diagnosed how British Secret Service got its name. And what is this that we're really speaking about? This alien agenda, this whole manipulation of the population and decimation of the human race. What is it that we're talking about? But genetics, eugenics. Look up the word eugenics. The racial hygiene program inherited by Hitler was created by the Rockefellers at Cold Spring Harbor Labs with the Whitneys and the Carnegies and the Vanderbilts and the wealthy aristocracy to control the bloodlines, to control, manipulate the populations of immigrants that were a threat, allegedly, to the success of long-term corporate control over America. The labor union problems. That's where genetics began. 1902, Rockefeller University Labs. Subsequently, the whole eugenics agenda for racial hygiene, getting rid of the feeble-minded, those who are less qualified to remain on earth. Miragistorum in Latin, miracles. It's the miracle tone. It's not theirs, it's the Creator's frequency. It's the Creator's number. They've secreted from you and I. We're now leveling the playing field. We now have evidence. It is the number that is at the middle, the heart of the electromagnetic color spectrum. It's at the heart. It's the only number that's also the heart of the electromagnetic sound spectrum. It's at the center, in other words, of the rainbow. At the center of the rainbow, you have this greenish yellow, the color of a baby leaf budding in spring. That's love. That's 528. And so this is now the first evidence that we have that virtually slam dunks that the center of your heart is connected to the center of the universe. The center of the heavenly throne, out of which all greatness and glory flows. let's go through these so that you see how they all speak to what I'm talking about in a restoration of this planet. These definitions come right out of Webster's dictionary. Ut quiant laxus, the first note of the original. It's now do. Thanks to the sound of music, we think do, a deer, a female deer, right? No, it's ut was the first note. It represents the entire scale or range, the gamut of dramatic emotion, from grief to joy. The whole series of recognized musical notes. In other words, this one note reflects the entire human condition, from grief to joy, and represents all the other notes. It's also a unit of magnetic field strength equal to 10 to the 5th power Gauss. That's 100,000. Revelation 14:1 comes right after that verse I shared with you earlier. The mystery of Revelation 13:18 says if you have this code, you know what the beast is up to. The very next verse is 14:1. It talks about a concert for 144,000. 1 plus 4 plus 4, that's 9. That's when the fat lady sings on this planet and we get it back. So what's missing from a 10 to the 5th power Gauss is 44,000. 4 plus 4, that's an 8. That's the Creator's number. Creator's number. The infinity sign. The double toroid structure of the universe also. So this is now the resonance. Second note, ut re, a vibration of large amplitude in a mechanical electrical system caused by a relatively small periodic stimulus of the same or nearly the same frequency or period as the natural vibration period of the system. A larger than normal vibration produced in response to a stimulus, whose frequency is close to the natural different way. The 417 hertz frequency of resonance is a small periodic stimulus whose frequency is so close to the musical mathematical matrix of the entire universe that that small little thing coming from your mouth or your little instrument in your dental office you. It's also defined in Webster's as a quality of enriched significance, profundity. You bet it's profound. And elusiveness. You bet it's been buried. It's elusive. Such as a quality of enriched significance, profundity, elusiveness. A poem has resonance beyond its surface meaning and action. Get this. An action in answer to or intended to undo a situation. Are we currently living in a situation? Are we in a dire urgency? Is humanity virtually on the brink of extinction? Yes. We need to bring back, listen to this, or that performance of a new action that brings back an earlier state of affairs. We're going home. We're going back virtually to the Creator in us. You know, the saying, love is where the heart is. Heart, mind, love, 528. Center, the heart of the electromagnetic color spectrum, heart of the rainbow, heart of the sound spectrum, heart of the figure 8, heart of the double toroid universe, the heart, the black hole, the singularity, the event horizon, the place where things manifest out of potential, ether, quantum field, into physical reality, is a miracle. 6, 5 to 8. So we're going back now. We're going back to love. We're going back to what's real. Not on this deception anymore. It's too deadly. You know what the miracle is defined as extraordinary occurrence that surpasses all known human powers or natural forces and ascribed to a divine supernatural cause, especially to God. So the middle C tuning fork is also used by the world's leading military weapons technicians to tune their most sophisticated military hardware. So let's just have an experience here. I'm going to just chant this. We can chant with the ah chant. Simple ah or ya, yod he vav he ya. You know, if you want to join me and get a blessing, you're welcome to. We should probably do it 3 times, right? If we're going to do it once, we might as well do it 3, right? Let's see if we can change the energy in the room. Let's see if we can experience a little divinity. Up for that? One more. Let's go. Actually, 2 more. And the last one, for those of you with eyes open, close your eyes, see if you can get some light coming in. So right now we're producing music in 528. Tetrahedron Records is dedicated now to producing music exclusively in 528. When I listen to music played by people like Scott Huckabee and other performers who are now retuning their instruments. A440, by the way, is a standard tuning to show you how the music industry likewise has been manipulated. This is what all the instruments, if we were to choose a standard tuning, this is the frequency that we would reasonably, as loving humanity, choose. But no, we have A440 as the standard tuning for the musicians in the room. The sophisticated mathematical analysis that we have done now proves that the A440 selection literally creates what is called in musicology the devil's interval. Between 528 and 714 is what A440 is all about. You know the chakra system? You know that energy centers in the body are vibrating and spinning. That if you can get the vibrations of that whole chakra system to basically get engaged with this divine human communion, this energy flow from the heavenly throne, what happens? There's nothing missing, nothing broken in the kingdom of heaven. You bring that into the Holy Spirit-filled temple, everything starts working again, and everything starts to get younger again. So that's the essence of what real healing is about. And I know most of you in this room have already, everything I'm saying, you're going, yeah, he's right on. So that the reality now we get to understanding. What did they do when they instituted A440? Where does A440 in the chakra system stimulate? It stimulates right here. Perfectly right here. As though you were to cap the heart. If you had desired to suppress the heart down from root chakra so that you're no longer grounded by the earth electromagnetic frequencies coming up ideally through your bare feet, instead of rubber insulation so that you can't get the Aina, the earth's resonant, magnificent blessing, that spiritual anointing that comes up through the earth that the native cultures all revered and respected. Suddenly now, if you were to select music that would suppress that from the heart down, you would choose A440 standard tuning. And that's what the Rockefellers did. When the Rockefeller Foundation in 1917 paid money to the arts, they gave to the American Federation of Musicians that instituted against global protest the standard tuning of all the instruments today. I don't care whether you love classical music, you're listening to A440, suppression of heart, or rock and roll, you're listening to suppression of the heart. And so that was what was accomplished in 1917. And subsequent to that, when it still didn't catch on because the rest of the musicians in the world were protesting, who did they give it to? Propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels for the Nazi Party. And because of Joseph Goebbels and the Nazis' alignment with the American Federation of Musicians, the world instituted A440 standard tuning, which we're all listening to. So that means when you tune on your radio right now, all of the music you're listening to is in a frequency that stimulates this left brain, egoic, fear-based consciousness versus, and at the same time suppresses the grounding and the loving, open-hearted evolution of humanity.